Welcome everybody to the Southeastern Region Advisory Council meeting. This meeting is being held in person at Green River, as well as being streamed live on YouTube. The public forum allows you to express your opinions, ideas on wildlife management in our state. This RAC considers your feedback on the proposals that we will discuss today, report them to the Wildlife Board. The Wildlife Board, not the RAC, is in charge of setting wildlife policy for our state. Wildlife management is complex and sometimes it can be emotionally charged. We all have ideas and opinions about what's best for Utah's wildlife. That's why we're here today. We encourage those who want to express their opinion today in today's meeting to fill out a comment card. Bring it up here to Chris. We expect all those in attendance to respect the people who speak, especially those who hold views that don't align with our own. Respectful behavior helps facilitate efficient and productive meetings where RAC members can listen, digest, and address the concerns, ideas, and proposals being presented. Disrespectful behavior includes booing, yelling, cheering, laughing while someone else is speaking. You can also help maintain respectful space by referring to people by name instead of descriptors. If this behavior occurs, we'll remind attendees to be respectful. If it continues, we will ask those individuals to leave. Lastly, to help reduce distractions, please put your phones on silent. If you need to take a call, we ask that you step outside to do so. With that, we'll dive right into the agenda. Let's go ahead and we'll have the RAC members introduce themselves. Start over here with Brad.
Brad Richmond, non-consumptive.
Charles Fisher, sportsman.
Sunshine Brosey, non-consumptive.
I'm Eric Luke. I'm a sportsman's rep.
Cash Stallings, public at large.
Kirk Player, sportsman.
And online we have Dana
I'm Dana and I represent BLM.
and Darren.
Darren Olson, and I represent the Forest Service.
And Steve.
I'm Stephen Duke. I represent sportsmen as well.
Are there any others online that I've missed? I believe we got them all. Okay, with that, we'll open it up to approval of the agenda and minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda and minutes.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion to approve it and a second. All in favor? Online, Darren?
Aye.
Sorry, trying to thumbs up.
That is unanimous, so. I'm supposed to give the Wildlife Board meeting update, and I could not find or didn't print off that update. Chris can't find it. We just have our Wildlife Board representative. Kent, would you be willing to offhand give us a little bit of a Wildlife Board meeting update from your last board meeting? Right into the fire. If you can't remember, that's.
Come to the microphone, I think.
Yeah, the last real board meeting was clear back in June or So it's been a little while, so. No problem. Well, let's move on to our regional update. We'll turn some time over to Chris for that.
Good evening. Thanks for being here. It's a beautiful time of the year. And thanks for taking an evening out of your fall and coming to this RAC meeting and for your volunteering to serve the people of Utah and help wildlife. All right. I wasn't at the last, I wasn't at the last RAC meeting back in May. So it seems like I haven't been at a RAC meeting in a long time. So I've missed you and I'm glad to see you again tonight. Let me give a quick regional update. We are busy doing lots of good things. Our aquatic section conducted bluehead sucker surveys at Farron Creek above Millsite Reservoir and then also in Millsite. And we found lots of bluehead suckers. So it was a good survey. They're also going to be doing some fall gillnet surveys at Schofield, Joes Valley, and Electric Lake. That'll happen in October. If you're interested in helping out on those, let me know. I'll get you on our email string, or I'll email you the exact dates. They haven't been set yet, but they will be set in the next week or 2 or 3. So that's a great opportunity to, we put down nets the night before, we come back the following morning and pull nets, and then you can get some hands-on experience with sorting fish and counting fish and measuring fish. So it's a good indicator of what's happening in the reservoir at that time. It's a good indicator to determine whether our management strategy is working or not. So I invite you all to attend that and help us with that survey. And then later this month, at the end of September, our aquatic section will be doing some surveys on Huntington Creek. There'll be some electrofish shocking and surveying that. Habitat section is busy. Fall is the busiest time of year, and that's just kicking off. And so they're doing getting ready to do a lot of habitat restoration work with our partners, federal, state, private landowners, nonprofit groups, doing great things for wildlife all over the region. People are always asking about the Stego Trailhead. I wish I had a great update for you tonight, but I can tell you that there's been a lot of discussion happening, a lot of back and forth with negotiating a new contract, and we're hoping to have that signed soon. I don't know when soon means, but we're closer to having it signed than we were a few weeks ago. So I think we're finalizing things on our end, and we're hoping that we can come to an agreement in the next, I guess soon. I won't say a date, but I have heard that some people have contacted the tribe directly and asked for an access permit, and I've heard that a few people have gotten them. So that's kind of what we've been telling people as they've asked, like, how can we get into Stego, or how can we get into the roadless area using the Stego Trailhead? And we've said, contact the tribe directly. And from what I heard today, that's been successful for at least a few people. So we are down some positions in the habitat section. I think I told you last spring that Makita Hansen is now our migration coordinator, and it's a Salt Lake level type position, but she works out of Price still. And so TJ Cook is our new habitat manager. He was our restoration biologist for several years. He's now the habitat biologist, and then one of our biologists left for a position in Nevada. So we have 2 open habitat positions. We're interviewing for those positions today and tomorrow. So I've been part of that committee. We'll hopefully get those positions filled in the next few weeks and have that team fully staffed. We're also been busy planting some crops on some of our WMAs, Gordon Creek, Nash Wash specifically. We have water rights on those lands, and we are able to plant some crops that help wintering wildlife. Law enforcement's been busy. They've been busy working the hunts. They've also assisted on some of the wildland fires that have happened throughout the state. And of course, dove and grouse hunts started this week, and so they've been working those. Our outreach section's been busy too. We have a really cool event coming up this month on September 19th. We're gonna have a bat night in Moab. There'll be some media releases about that and how to sign up. It'll basically be through Eventbrite, I believe. And you can, but if you're interested, let me know. I'll get you on our list. It'll be a great event though. We've done it in the years past. Usually starts, I don't know, in the evening when it's dark, and we go till about 11 p.m. It'll be in Moab, I think along one of the creeks, Pack or Mill Creek. I'm not sure which one. But one of the creeks, and Mill Creek, and it's you can see bats up close. Our biologists will be handling them, of course, but you can see them up close, and it's a great event. Now's in a few days from now, it'll be a good time to view kokanee salmon throughout the state. In our region, Electric Lake is a great spot to go see kokanee salmon. There's 2 spawns throughout the fall. The first spawn estimated dates are about September 10th through the 22nd. There's also a spawn that happens in October. So it's a really cool thing to do, is take your family, your friends to Electric Lake and walk up and down the tributaries and see those fish spawning. And then we have a youth pheasant hunt at the Huntington Game Farm, WMA, on October 26th. We'll have a press release about that, and information on signups. And then we'll have a mule deer watch on November 9th. So I'm not sure that if I've introduced Ashley Kennedy. So Ashley Kennedy is our new outreach volunteer service coordinator. She also works some of the recreation events. Her and Brandon are a team that do all things outreach. So if she looks familiar, it's because she worked at our front counter for a lot of years. And so she knows the answers to every question you can think of. So we're glad to see her switch roles and join the outreach team. And then our wildlife section's been busy. Right now they're doing pronghorn classifications. We do have a new biologist. Our conservation biologist for the next 10 months or 11 months is a person named Josh Fife. If you remember Scott Gibson, Josh took Scott's place for a year. Scott has a 1-year assignment. He is our Pinyon Jay conservation plan, recovery plan coordinator. So he's writing a conservation plan for the state for the upcoming year. And so we were able to backfill that position with Josh. And so you'll meet Josh at bat night, and hopefully you'll meet him throughout the next year. We did do a mountain goat survey on the LaSalles a few weeks ago. We counted 87 goats. If you plug that number into our siteability indexer model, it comes up about an estimation of 111 goats on the LaSalles. We have about 12 permits, I believe, on the LaSalles this year. And so after the hunt, the population should be right about 100, which is the number that we've agreed with the Forest Service to keep that population out at until we've conducted some additional vegetation monitoring research. And finally, we're hiring a CWD technician this year. So our CWD testing and detection and work is going to be a big focus, and we're hoping to get some great information from that. And with that, I can answer any questions, or if I can't, I have some smart people in the back of the room that can help me.
Any questions from the RAC? Thanks, Chris. Welcome, Scoot. Thanks, Kent. I do have the minutes from the last wildlife board meeting. I'll go through those as quickly as possible. There was a motion regarding, there was a motion to ask that the division look at the viability of selling green pelts for both bear and cougar. And that motion was to place that on the action log, and that passed unanimous. Regarding the CWMU rule amendments, there was a motion made to amend the division's rule language to reflect that a hunter may bring a maximum of 4 guests unless otherwise authorized by the CWMU operator. That passed 3 in favor and 1 recusal. There There was also a motion that they accept the division's recommendation on the 90% acreage requirement to qualify for a variance. That passed with a 2-1 vote with 1 recusal. And the last motion was to accept the balance of the division's recommendation regarding the CWMU rule as presented. That passed 3 in favor with 1 recusal. Regarding the conservation permit program, there was a motion made asking the division to look at a consistent sheep hunt ending date and for that to be placed on the action log. That passed unanimously. There's a motion to accept the balance of the division's recommendation as presented. That passed 3 in favor with 1 recusal. And the conservation permit list, it was a motion to approve the conservation permit list as presented. That passed 3 in favor with 1 recusal. And then the very last motion was a motion to ask the division to explore the concept of banking dedicated hunter hours prior to joining the program. And that will be placed on the action log. That passed unanimously. That's it. That's it for the wildlife board meeting update. So that brings us to the agenda item number 5, Strawberry Reservoir. So, and this is just an information item. Is Alan on?
Mr. Chairman, Alan couldn't be here tonight and I'm covering in his stead.
Okay, Craig, we'll turn time over to you.
Hi, my name's Craig Walker. I'm the Assistant Chief over Sport Fish with the aquatic section here at DWR in Salt Lake. Just an update in Alan's stead. Last winter, we had an angler detection of what we presumed to be an illegally introduced walleye while ice fishing at Strawberry Reservoir. Over the past year, Alan and his crew have been going out and attempting to verify whether or not additional walleye do persist in Strawberry Reservoir or have become established in Strawberry Reservoir. At this time, they have not detected any additional walleye. They have engaged in a variety of methods that they'll continue to use over the next couple of years, including netting, electrofishing, and the use of eDNA to try to figure out whether or not we have an expanding population of walleye there at Strawberry. One thing that I did want to mention is the fact that if we do detect additional walleye or evidence of an expanding population there, we are in a position to address those various different expansions with appropriate response measures currently. However, we have not discussed the strategic if this, then that approach. We believe that we have the time to develop that strategy. And in addition to developing it specifically for Strawberry, we'll be developing it for us to be able to address additional illegally moved fish events in the state of Utah, which for those of you that know, we've got some in the Southeastern region. We've had several over the past few years, and it's sad that it happened to Strawberry, but at the same time, it is somewhat serendipitous. It does give us the ability to use Strawberry, given its importance as a fishery in Utah, as a springboard to address the overall issue of illegal fish movement in the state of Utah.
Thanks, Craig. I have a question before I turn it over to the rest of the RAC for questions. What is the penalty currently for if someone is caught illegally introducing fish? Do you know that off the top of your head?
I believe it's a Class B misdemeanor. We've got it described in a West-wide plan. We looked at all the various different penalties for violations, and they're not extremely stringent. We'd like to see greater enforcement of the penalties that do exist, and in the long term, potentially have discussions with our law enforcement folks and our leadership about potentially coming up with greater penalty for the movement of fish.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the RAC? Okay, if not, before we move on to agenda item 6, I'd just like to recognize a couple of our wildlife board members have tuned in to listen. We appreciate your time. We'll move on to agenda item 6. Craig, we'll give you some time to make any clarifications before opening it up to questions.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, council members. Prior to fielding questions from the audience and the council tonight, I wanted to provide you with an overview of the process that we here in the Division of Wildlife Resources Aquatic Section undertake when developing our regulation proposals like those being presented to you this year. Regulations are a critical tool used by DWR as part of our adaptive fisheries management approach. We propose regulations that are intended to help us achieve statewide and water body specific management objectives in what we view as the ever increasingly challenging environment that we work within. Additionally, regulations aid us as we work to maintain satisfaction among an ever growing and ever diversifying angling public. Regions typically begin developing regulation proposals years in advance, beginning with the collection of fish population and angling data. Usually catch rate, length, weight, age data are collected from a subsample of the fish population using netting and electrofishing, while data related to angler pressure, catch, harvest are collected via creel surveys. Managers then evaluate these data, assessing whether fish populations are meeting species-specific population management objectives for a particular water body. Results from fish population and creel surveys are usually presented to anglers during management teams or informal stakeholder meetings, while angler feedback is gathered to aid us in the development of regulation proposals. Once developed, proposed regulations are put forward for assessment of public support via a survey, like was put out this year, emailed to over 25,000 licensed anglers. In an attempt to ensure that these surveys provide an unbiased assessment of regulation proposals from the angling community, we distribute the surveys randomly to selected license holders and distribute the survey to various groups within the sampling pool proportional to their representation among all licensed anglers in Utah. For example, 15% of licensed anglers in Utah are female, and 15% of the 25,000 potential respondents contacted were also female. With over 400,000 resident anglers, the vast majority of anglers will not be surveyed in a single year's random representative sample of 25,000 anglers. However, our survey methods adhere to the scientific standards for public surveys, and we therefore believe in the validity of our results. Before I close tonight, I wanted to speak specifically to the regulation changes proposed at Flaming Gorge Reservoir. The overarching reason for all fisheries management actions that we undertake, including the use of regulations, is to provide Utah's anglers with the most satisfying fishing experiences possible. Our effort to establish greater consistency across state lines at Flaming Gorge is designed to do just that. Our belief is that consistency in regulations across state boundaries will minimize confusion and limit the likelihood of angler violations at Flaming Gorge. The Flaming Gorge regulation changes proposed for 2025 are the culmination of nearly 8 years of negotiation and collaborative efforts between Wyoming Game and Fish and DWR. In closing, with nearly 4,000 responses from our varied angler interests, we're confident that the depiction of public sentiment presented regarding the 2025 fishing regulations is accurate and unbiased, and showcases overall public support for our regulation proposal package. We hope that the entire suite of proposed changes will meet with your approval. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Craig. With that, we'll open it up to questions from the RAC.
I got a question about walleye. I see that in this proposal, a reservoir, I believe it was Echo Reservoir, there was illegally introduced walleye, and now we're striking the catch kill and putting it back to a regular limit. Does that seem, to me, that seems like the DWR is okay with releases in certain water bodies, but not in others, especially as we just talked about Strawberry and other reservoirs where we've done rotone treatments like Red Fleet Reservoir and things like that. Do you see a conflict of interest there when it comes to that regulation change?
Thanks for the question. This is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. We are not okay with any illegal introduction of any species in Utah. However, we're dealt with a situation where we have to basically make lemonade with the lemons that we're given. In the event that established fish populations like the walleye population in Echo are not impactful at this time, our hand is somewhat forced, and we're in a position where we end up having to manage with that particular population. That is not diverse from what we've done historically, divergent from what we've done historically in Utah. However, as we pursue, like I mentioned, using Strawberry as the springboard to come up with a strategic plan on how we actually approach the introduction of illegal fish, or the illegal introduction of fish, I should say. I think that this is going to be one of the options that is left at the end when there's nothing left for us to do. Right now, the use of rotenone to continue removing fish, given the availability or lack of availability of rotenone, is not something that we're eager to pursue, especially on larger water bodies that we're dealing with irrigation partners on in a time when water and the maintenance of water levels in reservoirs is critical. That combined with the fact that mechanical removal might not be the most effective way to remove a species, it's a difficult situation that we're put in whenever fish are illegally introduced. Like I said, it's going to take a lot of gray matter and probably a year or two for us to wrap our minds around a strategic approach to addressing the issue itself. Hopefully, at the end of the day, we won't be left with the only option that currently we have really is in situations where, again, we don't have impactful introductions. We're left to manage with those introductions. Hopefully that makes sense.
I just have a follow-up question. Thanks, Craig. So you're saying that at Echo Lake, the walleye are not impactful on the other fish?
That's correct. We actually used Echo as kind of a laboratory. Our Animal Health Research Center up in Logan, that's kind of our research arm, undertook some netting there, looked at the perch populations, and looked at the impact of the overall fishery, which is our major concern there. And at this point in time, we have not seen a massive expansion like we anticipated of the walleye population. And for the expansion that's happened, we haven't seen an impact to the other components of the fishery.
Well, my major concern with today's agenda item is that it's, if we approve that portion, it's just adding fuel to the fire to folks who would illegally introduce a species to say, well, if I can do this enough, then eventually they're going to have to go back to that last resort, and it'll just keep pushing people to continue to do that.
Yeah, I think, when we looked at this at a west-wide scale, increased penalties are, of course, something that was discussed. The use of reciprocal license agreements across the states to potentially restrict somebody's access to licenses for both hunting and fishing if they are in violation. Additionally, we're looking at, our director's office is looking at potentially increasing the penalties for actually moving the fish, not necessarily stalking the fish, which is a difference, a subtle difference right now. You have the violation consists of actually putting the fish in the water, not moving the fish from point to point. So hopefully with those two things combined with some of the efforts that we're undertaking with regard to education, we can head a lot of this off. Again, in that west-wide examination, greater enforcement, as well as trying to proactively head things off through adult education are potentially the way to do this. The way that we look at it, it is very similar to any other aquatic invasive species that we've dealt with. And our approach should be somewhat similar to those other approaches that have been undertaken for things like quagga that have been fairly successful at containing a population that could have potentially spread and decimated several water delivery systems throughout Utah, as well as fisheries, but hasn't. And that's basically a result of voluntary compliance and good education. So what we're looking to do is emulating that, and hopefully not get to the point where we have to continually come up with the reactive response through regulations or managing with the cards that we're dealt.
Yeah, and then I hope that works. I don't think that comparing quagga mussels to a walleye is the same thing though, because a walleye is a sport fish where quagga mussels are a nuisance. And I think that the education for the public on something like that is going to be a lot easier than telling somebody that catching walleye is not something they should be doing in reservoirs that they want to, where the DWR has decided that they shouldn't be. I think that's apples and oranges there. But
It's somewhat similar, not to get in a debate with you, but adult education, whether it be about how you clean, drain, and dry your boat, or whether about the fact that your perceived efforts that you think are conservation are not actually conservation, they're equivalent to wildfires as far as their impact to the natural environment and our fisheries, people just don't understand the impact of their actions. I don't think there's a malicious intent in many instances. They're not trying to decimate fisheries. They're trying to actually conserve fisheries. And we need to explain to them that if they want to conserve fisheries, come to us first. So that's where we're headed.
Okay, and then I don't mean to steal the floor here, but I do have a few more questions on other things. The 20-foot line on spearfishing, I'm not a big spear fisherman. What is the benefit of that other than Wyoming has that rule? And is that something that we need to look at for other reservoirs within Utah, or is that just to mimic what they have?
It was to be consistent, similar to the ice hole regulation and all of the regulations that we pursued. Yes, they're designed to benefit the fishery when we talk about lake trout and kokanee regulations that were put in the package. But with regard to spearfishing or other gear type restrictions, those are just to become aligned with Wyoming so that there's less of confusion for users of the resource and less of a potential for people to get violations simply by crossing an arbitrary boundary.
Okay, and then also the 6-line rule. I see that we're going to change another reservoir to 6 lines. What is the benefit of keeping all the other reservoirs at 2 lines? And why can't we just move to a 6-line when we still have fish limits? I don't see what the point is of just 2 lines on some reservoirs, 6 on the other, if you're only allowed to take so many fish home regardless.
So 6 lines, you have to tend all 6 lines, whether they're tip ups, whether they're actual poles. And when you're tending those lines, your potential for hooking mortality, handling mortality is probably increased. We pursued a conversation with all 5 regions about the use of a 6-line or 6-pole or 6-rod, however you want to define it, limit statewide. When ice fishing, anglers, would love to have that. Our managers felt that in many instances, the benefit to the anglers as far as their ability to catch additional fish wouldn't be there, 1, and 2, that the potential for the fish that they did encounter due to the fact that they wouldn't be actively tending all 6 lines the potential for additional mortality on released fish, especially when we're dealing with pan fisheries, would be higher. So we restricted it to areas where, one, we wanted to see additional harvest and mortality of bluegill in the form of pelican reservoir, and two, at kokanee fisheries where your ability to actually detect kokanee with 2 rods through the ice is fairly limited when ice fishing based upon their behavior and their schooling and the pelagic aspect of how they school. We figured that 6 rods or tip ups would allow anglers to encounter those fish more often during the ice fishing season.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess another question is on spearfishing. We have limited rules on spearfishing on what reservoirs you can spearfish in. Has there been any talk about increasing those reservoirs, especially in fisheries that we know we want to encourage more take in, as spearfishing is a fatal action towards fish, so we could use that as a more management tool in those areas?
Sure. I mean, historically, spearfishing started off for what we've termed as rough fish, what people call rough fish, non-sport species. It expanded out to sport species and in many instances was used to simply address issues with overpopulated fish or efforts to control nuisance populations of fish. You know, in my mind and in discussions with the spearfishing community as well as other anglers, the take of a fish is the take of a fish. Our regulations for harvest are harvest regulations. Whether you take it with a spear or whether you take it with a hook and line, that fish is still taken. So to me, the methodology doesn't really matter. Getting comfort with that is, however, somewhat sensitive. We do have a diverse angling public. Traditional anglers don't view spear fishermen as anglers. They view them more as hunters. And it's going to be a slow turning of the ship as far as coming to consensus that we all are users of the resource and we all need to be working together to assist in the management of the resource. Long and the short of it is our spear anglers are seeing expanded opportunities statewide this year and in previous years. We want to do that in a stepwise manner. We want to make sure that we are not rubbing people the wrong way as we expand those spearfishing opportunities in the state.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, I guess when I read the spearfishing regulations, I look at from a Southeastern perspective, just being a RAC member here, and we only believe South I-70, all we have is recapture reservoir, which we've reduced due to the bass spawning spearfishing opportunities, which I think is great to do that. That's a good time to not actively spearfish bass, but it would be nice, I think, for some of those anglers in this area to have more opportunities.
Absolutely. We've met with the spearfishing segment of our angling public probably over the past 3 to 4 years. We basically worked through a process where we asked what they wanted. We then go to our regional managers and biologists and say, hey, here's the ask. What can we do to meet that ask? And we've kind of had that back and forth negotiation over the past 2 regulation cycles to expand those opportunities. I don't envision that stopping. I do envision it getting to a point where what we want to make sure is that, similar to other angling methods out there, fishing methods out there, that the opportunities we offer on the landscape are proportional to the need among our angling public. And at the end of the day, spear fishermen do represent a smaller component of the angling public. My perception, my opinion, as far as it just being another form of harvest and the regulation is the regulation, again, when we talk to other segments of the angling public, that isn't necessarily their opinion. And we don't want to get crosswise with other people. This is going to be a dance that we have to do over the coming years and decades as we try to integrate all forms of fishing, all forms of angling, so that our angling community is truly a coalition speaking with one voice as we face the challenges ahead.
Thanks, Greg. You done? Sunshine?
Yeah, I just had a question about your area where you're removing the +4 in the Uintas of the brown trout, brook trout. Yeah, sorry. I was just wondering about if that's an area where you have cutthroat trout and if you're worried about the impacts to the cutthroat.
We checked with our biologists, initially we had concerns about the removal of that limit, the bonus limit. They do not have any concerns with regard to impacts to any of the fisheries up there, including cutthroat trout.
Any other questions? Scoop?
Sure. So I'm not super familiar with this, but I've had a couple of phone calls from some friends in the southern region, specifically about Barney Lake and Manning Meadow Reservoir being changed to allow bait fishing. Can you elaborate on why that decision was made and what's the impetus behind it?
Sure. Well, I'll go bass backwards a little bit. I'll start with Barney Lake. And the reason why Barney Lake's regulation was put forward the way that it was is because from a law enforcement standpoint, and this was discussed during last night's RAC, from a law enforcement standpoint, Barney Lake is it's less than 2 miles away from Manning Meadow Reservoir. And as Manning Meadow goes, so goes Barney Lake. And that is why they both have the same regulations currently, and why we propose that Barney Lake continue to have the same regulation as Manning Meadow. So the change really is the Manning Meadow regulation. Barney is simply following suit for law enforcement purposes as far as making law enforcement easier. We had the law enforcement conservation officer from the southern region step up to the mic last night and verify just that. So that describes Barney. From a Manning Meadow standpoint, I spoke last night to this being a good thing and not being a good thing strictly because it provides additional opportunity to bait anglers at a water that has historically been limited to fly and lure only opportunities. It is an indication that we have been extremely successful in our effort to conserve Bonneville cutthroat trout in the state. Manning Meadow historically was one of a critical brood lake for us to recover, conserve Bonneville cutthroat trout in Utah. And it being now in a situation where we're able to at least propose opening it up to bait anglers, propose allowing for greater harvest and take of the fish, is an indication that we have been extremely successful. And it is probably going to be seen elsewhere in the state as we pivot away from conservation and get into maintenance mode for our cutthroat trout populations, both for Bonneville cuts, but also for Colorado's. As we get down that path, we're going to be managing with Colorado cutthroat trout more similar to other salmonids that we manage with and treat them more like sport fish. We do have the sport fish component of those southern populations represented in our hatcheries. And we're not fearful of potentially, using what have historically been brood lakes as fisheries. The one thing I will say as we move forward with our efforts to kind of segment the landscape and provide a diverse array of opportunities, again, for an ever diversifying and ever growing angling public in Utah, is to look at the various different species that we offer, the various different preferred behaviors, gears, those types of things, as well as the different types of water bodies in the state. I mentioned during our meeting last night that our lakes and reservoirs are more limited in their ability for us to kind of segment user groups. We're not making a ton more reservoirs, and there's not a ton of them relative to rivers and streams in Utah. If we want to segment user groups similar to what we have in Right Fork Huntington Creek, where we can create an enclave for a particular user group that uses flies only, we can do that with rivers. We can't necessarily do that with lakes. However, when we get to larger lakes, we can potentially have multiple users using the same water in different ways because they're able to self-segregate on that water. Ideally, we don't want to have conflict as crowding becomes an issue at our waters. We want to be able to disperse our anglers, but where we can't disperse our anglers, we want to be able to have them have the space to get along. The thing that I saw last night when we talk about Barney and Manning Meadow is the size of those water bodies may limit their ability to adapt to multiple user groups using the water at the same time.
So is there, thank you for that answer. That was really detailed. Is there a biological reason behind that? I mean, I know that you're saying that we can move from conservation to more of a management mode and allow for more opportunity. So is it strictly to allow more opportunity, or is there a biological reason for that there's an actual need to have bait fishermen?
The primary pursuit of the Manning Meadow change was a social regulation. The added benefit potentially is to make use of fish that are currently lost due to mortality, in a compensatory mortality situation where you're basically cropping off those fish that would be dying of natural mortality anyway. Additionally, one other added benefit would be that you would potentially hasten the growth of those fish to the maximum size they can achieve in that water body.
So I guess the downside then would be potential crowding from adding bait fishermen.
Yeah, and the viewpoints of the different user groups. I mean, we all know that, tiger muskie anglers do not like spear fishermen, bass anglers do not like trout anglers, fly anglers do not like bait anglers. I mean, we have these different divisive kind of mindsets within our angling community. And like I said earlier, we need to do a better job of bringing these groups together outside of kind of forced integration at these water bodies before we ever get to these regulations, I think, in the future. And I think that would head off a lot of these conversations that I've had over the past couple of nights and Trina had during the Northern and Central RAC. We use the resource differently. We perceive that one group trashes the resource, whereas another group does not. And we need to start having conversations similar to the conversations that I've had recently with various different tournament anglers, from those that fish in kayaks, those that fish for bass, those that fish for walleye, those that fish with spears, those that fish with archery tackle, bringing them all together and realizing that the dragon that needs to be slayed in the future is not one another. It's actually, the potential conflict with water use that may impede our ability to recreate on waters throughout Utah.
Any other questions? Anyone online have questions? I do have a question, Craig, concerning the ice hole size change. I based on your comments already, I take it that change is 100% just to be consistent with Wyoming.
That is correct. And, we've talked with SFW and Utah Angler Coalition and other anglers about this. What we did as far as our due diligence was to investigate whether or not Wyoming has seen anything in the way of additional human safety hazards as a result of having an unlimited ice hole size. They have not. And the case can be made in Utah, yes, that we do not have the same thickness of ice. We do not have the same recovery of ice overnight to freeze up these larger holes. I'm not going to debate it. We're proposing it because we want to be consistent, and we're trying to make a more satisfying, less onerous situation for our anglers when they go up on a water body that historically had completely divergent regulations And yeah, like I said, we've worked 8 years to get there. Our hope is that the package would be approved in total. However, again, that's your decision. So we propose in the
And
end.
that was one of my questions. You answered the one question about, whether or not Wyoming had seen increases. Was there any discussion as you have worked through these with Wyoming to them changing and complying more with ours? To me, there is a safety issue there. I don't know.
We tried as best we could. It was a give and take. Again, 8 years of negotiation. I think we ended up with 6 changes. They ended up with 3. At the end of the day, we ended up changing, for specific to Flaming Gorge, a statewide regulation related to a 2-day possession limit. They were not willing to move away from an unlimited ice hole size, which they have statewide. So it was that balance between, trying to push something through their commission, trying to push something through our board, and whether or not we felt we could get it through. To be honest, ice hole size was one that I did not anticipate being as debated as it was this year.
Thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
Any other questions? If not, we'll open it up to entertaining motions. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I guess we gotta finish a process here.
I was going to say, you're letting me off easy.
We'll have Chris give us the public online comments.
Yeah. All right, we had, I think 2 people answer the survey questions, and 100% strongly agreed with the division's recommendations. So here are some brief comments. You've all received the comments and have read them, but just to kind of summarize them, one person said they support the proposed spearfishing regulations, and then later on they said we asked the board to see spearfishing not just as a management tool, but as an integral, equal part of the angling community. And then the other comment was from the Utah Anglers Coalition, and they said that they support all of the proposed changes to the 2025 fishing regulations, except for the removal of the current size restriction on ice holes at Flaming Gorge Reservoir. Some of our members are opposed to this regulation change due to their concerns about public safety with unrestricted hole size. Because our organization operates by consensus, we are therefore taking no official position on this single regulation change.
Thanks, Chris. I ask our one public if there's any questions or comments.
I got one question. What is our current ice hole size there?
We're at 18 inches. Which
18 inches?
Which is larger. It's the largest in the state.
Yeah. Any comments from the RAC? No one online. Now we'll entertain motions.
I have one comment.
Brad, go ahead.
I commend the division in the use of their surveys. I think they reach out to a lot of anglers, and I think that's a very good thing, and how it's applied to their decision-making. With that being said, has there ever been a really glaring disagreement from the survey that the division may have, taken into consideration? I see where most of them on these items are all pretty much concur with the division, but every once in a while,
Historically, we have had some glaring disagreements. I can't particularly remember which ones they were. If we see something that is not supported at all by the general survey, we usually omit it from our proposed regulation package. And oftentimes in the interest of saving time and not having a 40-minute presentation, which I apologize for this year. A lot of regs. We try to strip those out ahead of time.
Any other comments? All right. Entertain motions.
I'll make a motion to, I kind of think this needs to be split up a little bit because there is a lot in there, but to accept the Flaming Gorge regulation changes as proposed.
I just turned it off. Sorry. I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Charles to accept the regulation changes for Flaming Gorge as proposed, seconded by Sunshine. Since we have so many online, let's just do a roll call. Brad? Charles? Sunshine?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Scoot?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
And Lynn?
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Any other motions?
I think I'll make a motion not to accept the change at Echo Reservoir for the walleye and keep them on the catch kill, just because I think that's a hard pill to swallow to say that we're going to accept that, but then continue to kill off all these other lakes they've been introduced in.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Charles to not accept the Echo Reservoir proposal for walleye, seconded by Sunshine. Any questions or comments on the motion? Okay, Brad,
I agree with that, yes.
Charles, Sunshine, Cash,
I'm gonna say no.
Kirk,
No.
Scoot,
No.
Dana,
No.
Steve,
No.
Darren,
No.
yes, Darren? Sorry, Darren.
Sorry,
Sure.
that was no.
No, okay. And Lynn?
No.
Okay, that motion fails.
You're looking at me like you want to comment, so I'll give it to you. I just think it simplifies it. I think 99% of the time, it's gonna be a catch and kill anyway. It's just simplifies it by taking that regulation off and doesn't necessarily change much biologically, kind of what they said, so. Yeah.
Okay. Any other Craig? Have a comment?
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to add, when it comes to walleye, they kind of serve two masters. We have two different angling groups that use it, and a catch and kill, although it's viewed as potentially not rewarding the angling public for making that illegal movement, there are plenty of anglers out there that harvest walleye under a certain size. And we are potentially in a conundrum there where even with a catch and kill, we are in a situation where we're benefiting anglers that may have moved those fish. So just a heads up, it's not an easy species to address. And like I said, we'll be trying to wrap our minds around coming up with that illegal movement strategic plan. And that will be something as an informational item that you will see in a couple of years.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Next motion.
I move that we accept the rest of the division's recommendations on these rule amendments.
Okay, we have a motion by Brad to accept the remainder of the division's proposal as presented. We have a second.
I'll second.
Seconded by Cash. Any questions or comments on the motion?
I would probably like to make one motion prior to that, to accepting the whole rule, if that's, unless it's too late.
You okay with that, to rescind your motion temporarily?
I'll support you here in just a minute.
Okay.
Just in the interest of what I talked about earlier, listening to the Southern RAC and their concerns down there, I do think that it would be good to have the wildlife board maybe talk about Barney Lake and Manning Meadow and the removal, or sorry, the addition of bait fishermen to those reservoirs. It sounds like there's a good niche of people there that really, really appreciate that opportunity and not having to be super crowded. I would move to remove those two from the recommendation of adding bait fishermen, just keep it to artificial flies and lures.
We have a motion by Scoot to not accept the division's proposal to add bait fishing to Manning Reservoir and Barney Lake. So do we have a second on that?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, seconded by Sunshine. Any questions or comments on the motion?
I think I'm actually fine with that because I think maybe it needs a little more discussion. So to eliminate those two for now would be fine, I think.
Darren, you have a question?
Yes, I guess maybe Craig might be the best one to address this. What other lakes or rivers in the area provide that kind of non-bait opportunity?
Craig, can you address that?
Sure. If Mike Hadley were here, he could give you specific names. I can tell you that there are 4 others in that area that offer the opportunity for fly and lure angling.
Thanks, Craig. Any other questions or comments on the motion? Seconded by Sunshine.
Are we amending Brad's?
No, he rescinded his. Okay, so we have a motion on the table. We'll call for a vote. Brad?
After the discussion that there are other available ones, I'm gonna vote no.
Charles?
No.
Sunshine? Yes? Cash?
No.
Kirk?
No.
Scoot?
Yes.
Dana?
No.
Steve?
No.
Lynn?
No.
Darren?
No.
A motion fails. We still have more to go, so keep going.
Now I'll put in my motion.
Okay,
And I'll still second it.
all right. So have a motion to accept the remainder of the division's proposal. Seconded by Cash. Any questions or comments on the motion? Call for a vote. Brad? Charles?
No.
Sunshine?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Scoot? Dana?
Okay.
Yeah.
Steve?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
That passes. Don't remember the total count to 2.
And it's required by other Utah sections of state code. Really, this is more of cosmetic changes than anything. We're restructuring the rules so you have standalone sections for acquisitions of real property, disposal of real property, and then the exchange section just says do both of those. So we wanted to make it more clear for my staff to be able to go through this process and add in those other sections of Utah code that need to be followed as well as changing some definitions so they're standardized across state law. And then just some other clarifications like adding a purpose statement and asking for mitigation when disposals are required.
Thank you. You have questions from the RAC?
I have a question.
Scoot?
So, I watched your presentation. Good job. it looks like there's quite a few steps that need to happen, including like an appraisal and everything else. Can you tell us about how much time all that takes?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So the time varies across acquisitions. So for acquisition of real property that's held in private ownership. So a landowner has come to us, wants to conserve their property. Maybe it's adjacent to an existing wildlife management area. That process can take anywhere from 6 months to well over a year because we're required to go through the appraisal process. Appraisals usually take 60 to 90 days, especially if we're going to use federal funds. Then we have to go through the grant process as well. We have to go to county commission meetings. We have to put public notices together and then go through all of our contracting process too. So it could be quite lengthy.
Does that have the potential to hamstring the division on acquiring properties that they'd be interested in just because of the additional time?
Time has not been a big factor for us, and I've been with the program for 6 years. And while sometimes it does put us in a bit of a pinch, we're usually able to get it done. The Cinnamon Creek acquisition up in the northern part of the state that Land Trust put up for auction, that was an example of us on a real time crunch, but we were able to pull through and get it together to purchase. So some of the exceptions to the appraisal rule that you'll see in here are also methods that we have in place to ensure that if there is a time crunch like that where we might lose the opportunity to acquire a property, that we would have that out, if you will, to get an appraisal.
Okay, so with those exceptions, if you have something like that, how much can it expedite that process?
By quite a bit. We can cut down on the process by months. We still have to go through especially if it's private property, we still have to go through the other sections of Utah law that require us to do county council or commission meetings, public comment, things like that. The Cinnamon Creek example is a good one because it was another state entity, so we didn't have to go through those processes. So we were able to put up our bid for that purchase just like the general public was able to, and then close on that within, I want to say, less than 6 months.
Any other questions for Chelsea? Any questions from the public? I don't believe that there were any online comments on this agenda item, so no public comment cards. We'll open it up to comments from the RAC. No comments, and we'll entertain
I'll
motion.
make a comment, I guess.
Okay, Cash.
I'll just say this. Throughout my hunting life, I've really gotten to benefit from our wildlife management areas that the division maintains. I don't often love all the restrictions that we have on them, but I do love that they are there as another source of public land for us to go hunt and enjoy and recreate on. And so I hope that will be a program that we continue to maintain going forward, where we get hunters and anglers access to property that they would have never had before. And I think it's a very good use of our tax dollars to go towards those type of efforts and provide opportunities for memories to be made for all of us.
Thanks, Cash. Any other comments? Anyone online? Okay. We'll open it up for motions.
I'll make a motion to accept as proposed.
Second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Charles to accept the division's proposal as presented, seconded by Brad. Any comments or questions on the motion? Call for a vote. Brad? Charles? Sunshine?
Yes.
Cash? Kirk?
Yes.
Scoot?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. That brings us to the end of our agenda items. Just real quickly want to thank again our wildlife board members who have taken the time to join us and tune in both in person and online, and also our RAC members and the division who have taken the time to to come here and be a part of this. So thank you all. We'll entertain a motion to cease and desist.
So move.
And I'll second.
We have a motion seconded. All in favor? Okay, thank you. We'll adjourn.
Thanks, everyone.